Tucker Carlson has released part 2 of his interview with former Biden associate Devon Archer. He asked Archer whether ex-Ukrainian prosecutor Viktor Shokin was hostile to Burisma.
Later, Archer called
Why would Western powers even get involved in who the chief prosecutor in Ukraine is? Why would Western powers even get involved in who the chief prosecutor in Ukraine is?
That's a question that I don't know.
I couldn't control myself. So, but within Burisma,
right,
this Shokin was considered a threat to your business.
Shokin was considered a threat to the business. I think anyone in, again, you got to get the signals to the government. I think anyone in government was always a threat, and always trying to shake down these businesses that were highly successful and enriching the owners and the staff and the board and whatever. Yeah. And so at the end of the day, Shokin was taking a look, and again, if I wasn't involved in.
Later, Archer called assertions the Bidens aren't corrupt to be categorically false.
There's no corruption here at all. This is totally normal. Joe Biden had no role whatsoever in his son's business or knowledge of it. But
right.
How would, I mean, that seems false.
Yeah, I think that's categorically false. I think that he was aware of Hunter's business. He met with Hunter's business partners. You found a letter that illustrates that he knew me.
And he's thanking you. He's thanking you for his efforts.
So I think that was, I think
your efforts. Yeah.
I think that's not factually right.
There's no corruption.
I mean, we just talked about this. There's no way it's possible for the president to not have had some type of involvement or knowledge in what his son was doing. Jumping on a phone call, and maybe the president didn't say, well, hey, I'll make this call for you guys. But him merely getting on the phone and saying, well, hey, Hunter, nice to meet your friends. That's enough to sort of signal to someone, oh, okay, so the president is aware, or the vice president is aware of what's going on.
Yeah, I think it's tough when you have Devon Archer saying this as someone who is, testifying there in the room when Hunter Biden was with Zlochevsky and Vladim, and said, all right, like call your dad. And then on speakerphone or what have you, calls his father, and they all talk together. I am not fully buying Devon Archer's testimony here as what is the evidence of the corruption of the case. He apparently doesn't have anything to say about the nature of the conversation, what was said. He's not talking explicitly here that is the evidence of corruption. And so I think what's in his 141-page testimony is where we'll find his account of what happened. But I think that because we have Zlochevsky testifying to the alternative, saying that this is not how it went down, that Hunter Biden's father, Vice President Joe Biden at the time, was not involved, is fascinating. We also have, Shokin's deputy saying that the investigation into Burisma was dormant at the time. There's a lot of conflicting evidence here. And I think what we would really need to get Joe Biden would be that paper trail of the $5 million to the Vice President Joe Biden and the other $5 million to Hunter Biden, but definitely the money that went directly to Joe Biden, definitely some paper trail of communications. I know that they were very careful about this and made it very hard to follow, but I don't believe it's impossible. I don't believe it's out of the scope of what our intelligence community can do, the FBI and the DOJ, in tracking down that paper trail to have really solid evidence. We can look at the circumstantial evidence and say this seems like corruption. We should pass some legislation to prevent things like this from happening. But when it comes to really nailing down Joe Biden as being this involved in what was going on in Burisma, that he was on phone calls consulting, I'm just not convinced that with one witness's testimony, we can definitely say Joe Biden was guilty.
Yeah, but I don't think that the president had to necessarily be actively engaged in the conversations. I think merely a phone call and the president being aware. I mean, I doubt Hunter Biden would just call his dad, put him on speakerphone with other people in the room, and not say, oh, Dad, by the way, I'm sitting with my business associates. Merely making that call and the president saying, oh, hey, son, hello, business associates, it's great to be on with you. That is enough to me to sort of signal to those individuals that, oh, yeah, I have some sway with my father, and my father is aware of what I'm doing. It doesn't have to be explicitly stated otherwise, is what I'm essentially saying here. And again, I go back to that one particular line. This is for the big guy. Who else would the big guy be other than the president of the United States? And Hunter Biden isn't exactly the most careful guy in the world. I mean, let's not forget his laptop or him taking photos of himself driving a Porsche 100 plus miles an hour with a crack pipe in his hand. And so it's not going to be difficult to find a paper trail here if we're willing to look. But I don't think there's an appetite from Democrats and the current political apparatus to look into this because they're concerned about the implications this could have on 2024. That is clear.
I think that's correct. And I would also say that they are reluctant to look into this because this is a situation where you have President Biden supposedly influencing, some foreign policy, withholding aid to Ukraine for the exchange, that Viktor Shokin, who, allegedly was prosecuting Burisma. Okay, you have that circumstance. You also have a pretty common circumstance of someone in a high public office who has a friend who's on the board of a company, who has a friend who's on the board of a multinational company, who's headquartered overseas, and they have a phone call and they talk about what policies would be convenient for them to vote for in one direction or another. How common is that? Just because it's not someone's son or not someone's family member doesn't mean that's not corruption as well. And I think that happens far more frequently in Washington than members of Congress care to own up to, than the foreign policy establishment cares to own up to, and more than the DOJ cares to own up to, because they would be up to their ears in investigations if every time corruption of this nature went down, they would have to investigate it and press criminal charges. And so realizing the extent of the corruption when you just remove the family element, just imagine if it was someone's friend or former business partner or someone that they were a legal associate to. This happens far more frequently than just in the case of the Bidens and just in the case of the Trumps. And so it would be precedent setting to find someone guilty. And I think a lot of members of Congress are reluctant because they could be guilty of something similar.
And that may be true, but this is why Republicans say that the political establishment is against Republicans. Because if this were Trump with all of his shenanigans, or any other Republican for that matter, we would be looking into this. The mainstream media apparatus would have a story every other day talking about what the individual did or didn't do, what their children did or didn't do, other family members who may have also directly or indirectly benefited. But because Joe Biden happens to be a Democrat, a D behind his name, they're not really going to give this a lot of attention. I mean, I can't think of many articles or many coverage stories by mainstream outlets talking about this topic because they want to sweep it under the rug because they dislike Donald Trump that much. Well, that does it for us this week on Rising. Brianna and Robbie will be back in the chairs on Monday. Jess, it's been wonderful hosting with you. I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, it's been good hosting with you, Shermichael. Everyone have a good weekend. Bye, y'all.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.